At this moment, the armed forces of Ukraine are advancing further and will soon enter Briansk. In Rostov, a real hysteria has begun over this. Meanwhile, as Briansk trembles with fear, the armed forces of Ukraine have taken out an entire company of Russians in the Kursk region. Watch the report on what is currently happening on the front line and the losses the Russian armed forces are suffering.
The scale of the tragedy will last for years. The Kremlin is provoking an environmental disaster at sea. In the Russian port of Ust-Luga, the tanker Koala, which was carrying 130,000 tons of fuel oil, has broken down. The Finnish border guard has already dispatched a patrol plane to the Gulf of Finland due to the accident. And while the Kremlin is pondering what to do with the tankers, Russians are raising the alarm in the armed forces, entering Briansk. This is how most news feeds of Russian media sound.
The Ukrainian armed forces are preparing a breakthrough into the Briansk region. The underground reported coordinates. The pro-Russian underground has reported on the Ukrainian armed forces' preparations for a breakthrough into the Briansk region.
The fact that the Russian Federation does not rule out such a scenario is evidenced by the accelerated pace of construction of engineering and fortification structures in both regions, on which a record $500 million have already been spent from the Russian budget, plus the creation of operational tactical groups, Briansk, Belgorod, a total strength of up to 90,000 personnel.
While Briansk trembles with fear, the battles in the Kursk region continue. Ukrainian fighters have stopped a massive attack by the occupiers. Russian troops, along with North Korean soldiers, have once again launched an assault in the Kursk region. Overall, Russia lost at least a company of personnel in this unsuccessful assault.
It is worth noting the successful tactics of the Ukrainian defense forces in destroying Russian columns and columns of North Korean soldiers. At the time of the still ongoing deployment of units, it is precisely this tactic that allowed the Ukrainian defense forces to report the losses among Russian and North Korean military personnel.
Moreover, throughout the entire full-scale war, Russia has already lost over 850,000 of its military personnel killed and wounded. And yet, the Russians themselves are now afraid of their own army's soldiers. Ukrainian intelligence intercepted another phone conversation of the Russians.
About the fact that they are shooting there, not at you. What did you do to them? And you, well, grab. Ike, it's loud. You can hear the grab. There I hear some impacts, something. You don't walk outside. Why don't you walk? There in some telegram, a soldier ran away. Only the leaders were also hit.
Recently, there has been a mass desertion from the ranks of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Moreover, the desertion with firearms. Accordingly, these gangs of marauders pose a serious threat, primarily to the civilian population. According to the Russian side, an interception plan has been implemented in the Kursk region at the moment. It concerns the escape of 3 former convict servicemen from the 104th Air Assault Regiment, 76th Air Assault Division.
But while Putin's soldiers are fleeing the war in some regions of Russia, it's getting very loud again. For example, explosions were heard in the Krasnodar region.
So it has started in Krasnodar. Everyone sit down, understand.
Run, 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 run. Drones likely attacked the Afipsky oil refinery. A fire broke out there. This is not the first and certainly not the last attack on Russia's oil refineries. According to experts, about 46% of Russian refineries have already been damaged or destroyed.
46% of Russia's oil refineries have been destroyed as of today. That's how you should buy a horse. 36%.
Well, 6 missiles and 6 drones hit Briansk, targeting the silicon plant, which has been halted. 6 hit directly on the plant.
Good. And overall, in 2024, drones have struck Russian refineries and fuel depots at least 81 times. And this is just the beginning.
While in the occupiers' army, it's complete madness. In Sukatkom, they drove through the enemy, breaking through their defenses. In 2 months, the Russians lost 100,000 people. The occupiers have never faced such losses before. About the enemy's massive losses and what awaits them on the front line. Watch.
The Russian army has been suffering huge losses in recent months, the highest in almost 3 years of full-scale invasion.
According to our calculations, the total losses amounted to over 434,000 personnel of the warehouse itself. Among them, there are approximately 150,000 of them are dead.
According to the latest report from the Institute for the Study of War, in just the past 2 months, the Russians have lost nearly 100,000 people.
The Russian troops have lost 48,240 people. More than 3 Russian motorized rifle divisions in January 2025, making January the second largest month of losses. Available data indicates that Russian troops lost 96 people per square kilometer of captured territory. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense reported that Russian troops lost 48,670 soldiers in December 2024. Their highest monthly loss rate since the start of the full-scale invasion.
According to the BBC, the largest percentage among the dead are newly mobilized volunteers.
Most notably, 23% of all the deceased we identified are volunteers. That is, those who signed a contract after the start of the full-scale invasion. We also include in this category those who signed a contract to avoid criminal punishment. Slightly fewer, 17%, of all known deceased are prisoners, already convicted individuals who went to the front from correctional colonies. Another 12% of the deceased were mobilized, and another 17% are career military personnel.
But the problem is not only in training, but also in the lack of military equipment.
Clear evidence of this is the assaults using still Soviet automotive industry products, that is, on passenger vehicles, buggies, motorcycles, quad bikes, but with a minimal amount of heavy armored vehicles.
And in the number of volunteers, to fill the gaps on the front, they are literally sending colleagues on crutches into assaults.
Either they were discharged from hospitals or did not complete enough treatment and rehabilitation. The so-called CRIPPLED battalion. This is quite remarkable. A novelty of the Russian army, indicating a severe shortage of personnel.
In light of this, it's impossible not to recall the smirk of the Russian Defense Minister Belousov during Putin's report on those killed at the front.
It is our duty to always remember our comrades who died defending the motherland and our people. To surround their families, their children with constant care. I have said many times, and I will say it again. Their children are our children. We must never forget this.
The Russian authorities deliberately intensified the meat assaults to achieve results before the new US president takes office.
They are trying to solve strategic tasks for themselves. This includes reaching the administrative borders of the Luhansk and Donetsk regions. Moreover, the intensification of the Russian offensive is precisely in November, December, and accordingly January. That is the period of the election race in the United States. Accordingly, already the anticipation of the inauguration of the newly elected President of the United States.
At the same time, experts are confident that the Russians will no longer be able to occupy Ukrainian territories at such a speed, as they have reached larger populated areas.
These are Chasiv Yar, Toretsk, and accordingly the Pokrovsky direction. These are urbanized areas with a very dense urban development and the presence of so-called industrial zones. Accordingly, fighting in urban environments is high-intensity combat, which leads to a high rate of personnel loss.
And yes, the number of their losses can only increase unless the Russian authorities abandon their bloodthirsty ambitions in favor of common sense.